Hello, I'm Toycat, and war sure is brutal, and as a result the world's countries have come together to agree on some internationally binding conventions about what should and should not be allowed in warfare. Now I could explain each and every one of these conventions, but instead wouldn't it be far more fun to just break them inside of Minecraft and show you which war crimes you can commit on a daily basis, and indeed one of your friends has probably committed against you. So let's start with the Geneva Conventions. So the Geneva Conventions are perhaps the most well-known law to do with war, and that's probably because the 4 conventions have been signed by every single nation on Earth. That's right, even North Korea has signed these. Even North Korea agrees that there should be some basic standards to do with international conflicts, and that is shocking by itself. It means these will be prosecuted anywhere in the world that they happen, and the first of them is to do with the condition of wounded and sick in armed forces in the field. If you capture a bunch of villagers and you decide to round them up and keep them in a little prisoner camp, it's on you to make sure that they are properly fed and looked after, and therefore another key part of the first Geneva Convention is that when you are a party to a conflict, you should record the identity of any dead and wounded and transmit this information to the opposing party. Failure to do so. The second Geneva Convention is to do with the amelioration of the condition of wounded, sick, and shipwrecked members of armed forces at sea, and although this is a lot of things about how you should deal with shipwrecked soldiers, it also states that you should not ever attack a hospital ship while performing hospital duties, and therefore the third Geneva Convention is relative to the treatment of prisoners of war, so just in case you do decide you're going to capture someone, you're going to keep them in your own thing, it's important that you do not inflict any physical or mental torture, nor any other form of coercion. So, when I do this right here, this absolutely hilarious joke that, I love and that he's totally on board with, that is actually a form of physical torture. When I trap them in a room and try to force them over and over again to get the right trade for me, because no, I don't want an efficiency 2 librarian, give me another one, that is actually a breach of the third Geneva Convention. And I think you should keep that in mind next time you try to farm villagers in your Minecraft world. No, this is a form of coercion, not okay, and you know what, you might as well just torture the villagers because you're basically already breaching a Geneva Convention. The fourth Geneva Convention is about the protection of civilian persons in time of war. Basically, it is unlawful to deport, transfer, or confine villagers. Those are definitely not things I have done before in my survival world. And also the extensive destruction and appropriation of property not justified by military necessity and carried out unlawfully and wantonly. Basically, just destroying a villager's house because you want to and because you want the resources, that's kind of bad. Deciding that, you know what, I don't like this villager house here, I would much prefer it be destroyed because those villagers made me suffer. No, it's not okay. Making big explosions, not an okay thing. And in fact, I think you'll find this is a... Poisonous weapons are actually also outlawed by this convention, and therefore if you use them on any target whatsoever, even one you think can totally handle it, it is a direct contravention of the 4th Geneva Convention, and therefore it is a... So even though the Geneva Conventions are the most well-known examples of international law, there are actually many other internationally binding agreements to work out what shouldn't be allowed in war, because despite war already being an avoidable outcome, when you are fighting with another nation, it's important to have fair rules imposed, and because of that, the Third Hague Convention of 1907, one of the oldest pieces of still existing legislation, does confirm that if you are to have warfare with another country, it is important that you declare war first. Not having an official declaration of war is in fact a war crime, and this is why it's see even in movies and stuff that you have to give away the advantage you could have by stealth bombing something, because without declaration of war there is a serious punishment. This convention is the reason why when Japan didn't declare war on the United States before bombing Pearl Harbor, that was seen as an act of treachery. This is why when you play any video game you have to declare war before you can fight something. It is a war crime not to, and therefore, you know what, probably best not to do the war crimes, right? You know what, that's vaguely the message of this video. Probably best not to do them. But if you want to do one, how about, you try and avoid the Geneva Protocol, which is the use of chemical or biological weapons. Again, it doesn't matter what your target is. If you use any chemical or biological weapons, say a weapon designed to slow down your enemies, that is considered... Also, then there's... Not to mention... And finally, a nice Bedrock exclusive one. The UN Convention on Genocide, which, yes, seriously didn't come into effect until 1948, genocide, the idea of killing an entire national, ethnic, or religious group, seriously wasn't a crime until 1948, but the idea itself wasn't even really considered until 1943. There have been many historical genocides that we've tried to throw before then, but technically speaking, there wasn't a concept of genocide until the big one, the one that everyone knows when it comes up, and therefore, if you try to kill an entire nationality, and you better believe this village does fall under one nation, it is considered. So keep in mind that genocide is the worst crime that humans can commit that we know of right now. It is a serious crime against humanity, a seriously punishable one, but despite that, let's say that there's a villager, one of the few survivors of my intended genocide, and they want to punish me, and they want to defend themselves from me, and they decide they're gonna, breach the Ottawa Treaty of 1997 and use concealed landmines. Well, here's the thing, even if, they are totally justified because, oh yeah, I totally did some bad things in the past. Even if that is totally true, the use of concealed landmines where I'd have no idea if they're going to be there is considered to be... There is no international treaty that says, oh yeah, well, it's bad to use war crimes until they're used against you. However, in the international sense, a lot of countries don't commit war crimes just because they know that it means they can be used against them. This was true in Japan. Japan considered using chemical attacks during the defense of their country before they were, of course, nuked themselves. But then they figured, you know what, probably not best to provoke an aggressor and give them that ability. Same in Iraq, same in a few different wars around the world. Generally speaking, you can't use them, even if they're used against you, but countries fear that, if they do it, other countries might too, and it's one of the reasons all of these things do, stick around, including the Ottawa Treaty, which you've probably heard something about. Landmines are real bad, people die every year, not to mention the property damage. I mean, that's really the real victim right here, as you can see. This villager's lost his lovely little fence. But, yeah, people die from these every single year, and that's why there's been a big push since 1997 to get rid of them, but a big push for something that doesn't really exist is the Protocol on Blinding Laser Weapons. So laser weaponry is in fact banned. If you have a weapon that fires a laser beam, that is not okay, and that is a breach of international treaties, and therefore it's a... But the cool thing about this war crime, it's a really good one. It's one of my favorites out there. The good thing about this war crime is the fact that, unlike all of the others, it's the first time we've banned something before it was used to deadly effect by humanity. Every other thing that we had to make illegal was because we'd seen the consequences, they were real bad, and we decided that should probably not happen again, and, even genocide's on that list. However, laser weapons have yet to be used by forces, but it is illegal to have any weapon that will blind intentionally the enemy, or even to seriously harm them for any long amount of time. If you damage the eyesight of an enemy permanently, that is a... The most recent convention to do with warfare that has been internationally agreed is the banning of cluster bombs. That's right, if you have a cluster bomb that has more than 10 explosives coming off from the same one, that is officially considered not okay. There's actually a bunch of size limitations and there's rules to do with exporting those arms and stuff like that, but if you use cluster weaponry, i.e. a bomb that launches other bombs that has a semi-random effect, this is deemed to be too high of a cost to be used in warfare, and any countries that signed up will not be able to use it. Although it's worth mentioning that the United States has not signed up, so, if you're America, feel free to cluster bomb as many villages as you like. So I think it's important to note at the end here that even though most countries try to follow international law, it's worth mentioning that even though all of these conventions have been in place for decades, there are still war crimes being committed on a semi-regular basis. I mean, the Syrian War of 2011 is probably the most, famous example. There are still arguably war crimes being committed right now, and that is a tragedy. But the most recent convictions we've had, because the International Crime Court is based in the Netherlands, in case you're curious, has been for the Serbian War of the, late 90s, the Kosovo War, you could perhaps call it, and there have been some evictions, and there have been some serious sentences granted, because if you commit crimes against humanity, turns out that's a bad thing. But yeah, mostly killing of civilians are the things that we get people on, because killing civilians, not a good thing. Even if you really think that your, side in an argument is right, it's not okay to kill civilians of an opposing combatant force. However, what's interesting to note, because this is also just on that same side note, these are only agreements to do with international conflict. Within your own nation, if you really want, you can actually use as much force as you like on your own citizens. Perhaps this is why North Korea has signed up to the Geneva Convention, because the Geneva Convention only applies to international warfare. You are free to, do any of these things to your own citizens. So if I pledge my allegiance to the red and yellow banner and the giant village statue, then I'm just the ruler of this place, and therefore it's totally okay to do whatever I want. I've got poisons and arrows, sure, but again, it's domestic. It's okay to poison people as long as they're your citizens. That is the key message to take there. Because, yeah, that's kind of your own thing. Also, I guess, against animals, there's no international war crimes. That's also under national jurisdictions. And you know what? Really, when it comes to fighting, that's the only place where we have international crimes. Otherwise, it's all national. And maybe that's a cool thing, maybe it's not. Maybe this video is just designed to teach you that the world is a bit more complex than objective, bad crimes and objective things that are just wrong internationally. There are some things that you can do and totally get away with. But the question you should be asking is, should you do those things? And the answer is yeah, because Minecraft is fun, right? Anyway, thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you all enjoyed it. Or maybe this was the worst thing I've ever made. Let me know in the comments down below, because I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye.